Now, it's ironic, actually, in a way, that the uprising, which is primarily a national liberation struggle, should have provided the impetus for the women's movement to examine the social question. Yes, my name is Taraki, and I teach sociology at Birzeit University. You asked a very general question, which is university education under the occupation. Yeah. That's quite a big subject, but let's say that universities in the occupied territories since the mid-1970s have given the opportunity to a large number of young people from backgrounds which you might call poor or disadvantaged to complete their educations, and this experience has proved to be very important in many ways, primarily in providing a rather large cadre of educated people and intellectuals, and secondly, has provided a lot of local institutions with leadership and with people with good educational backgrounds. So, and third, perhaps I would add also that the universities, beginning around the mid-70s, were the focus for student activism, and of course the student movement formed the backbone of the national movement for a long time. So the universities have played a very important role in Palestinian society, perhaps much greater than their size within society. And of course, as expected, the occupation authorities have been very hard on the universities throughout their existence because they have viewed them, and perhaps correctly, as a forum for the expression of nationalist sentiment and for the expression of sentiments against the occupation. Of course, they have neglected their educational role, but they have played a very important political role, which has to be recognized. And so for all of these reasons, they have been particularly targeted. And obviously during the uprising, throughout most of the uprising, they were closed. And I must say that today is the last day of August, and we just received another 3-month closure order, which means that we will be the only university to remain closed after the end of this month in the occupied territories. And so perhaps it says something about what the universities mean to the Israeli authorities.
Why has Birzeit been targeted?
Well, I mean, it's hard to know why Birzeit has been targeted, because it's not even the largest. Najah is larger than Birzeit. It's no longer really distinguished in terms of political activism. It used to be, but it's not. So I suppose there are a number of reasons which one could guess at, but nothing, of course, has been given by way of a reason. So we expect to be closed when we reopen for the new academic year, which will be the 4th year we operate under closure. And I must say here that it's taking its toll on the faculty and on students, and also on the facilities. The situation has indeed become very critical. It's very hard to continue teaching under these circumstances.
Could you explain some of those tolls that?
Well, you know, the price we have paid can be measured in different ways. On one level, for instance, I think the students have paid a high price in terms of not being able to have a normal university life, not being able to participate in student activities, not being able to go to a decent library, not being able to use proper laboratories, not being able to finish a semester within the required time for it, which at Birzeit is about 15 weeks. Students have spent anywhere from, let's say, 6 months to 9 months finishing one semester. So that all these things, of course, has meant that they have benefited less, and on our side we can see the effect of this kind of slow deterioration on performance and on academic standards. Generally speaking, and this applies of course to the schools as well as to universities, whenever there is a long interruption in the educational process, let's say within a semester, it's very difficult to I mean, the learning process gets aborted. You know, you need to build up on information. You need time to develop skills, and all of these things are compromised when the semester is interrupted for a month or 2 months. So this inordinately long period is definitely detrimental, and this of course was very damaging when the schools were closed for long periods during the first 2 years of the uprising. Now the situation has improved in the schools, but the universities still suffer from that. And of course I didn't mention the fact that a lot of students, because they don't all live in the area where we teach, have difficulty reaching their classes because of curfews, because of closures of roads, because of a number of restrictions. So you find often students missing, and it's just all over. It's very difficult to teach under these circumstances, extremely difficult, and difficult to study, I dare say.
Yeah.
If I were a student, and of course we have students now at Birzeit who've been in the university for about 8 years, and they still haven't graduated. And it should take them 4 years. It's just been taking double the time.
Could you talk a bit about the Islamic? You specialize in the Islamic?
No, I don't specialize at all. It's one of my interests, but there are people who do specialize. You could talk to them. We could suggest names later.
Could you talk about your work? Are you comparing the Islamic movement?
No, basically I have an interest in it. I just did one small article on the subject, so I can't say that I have done field research on the subject. In fact, no one really has. But what's interesting is, and definitely prominent as a phenomenon here after the uprising, is you might say the increasing visibility of the Islamic movement, the most prominent group of which is the Islamic resistance movement, or Hamas. But of course there are other groups as well. And so at this stage I think that they have carved themselves a niche definitely within the political configuration in this country. And they are a political force and a social force to be reckoned with as well. Now, estimates as to their strength vary wildly, and I'm not going to venture any estimate. We just read in the newspapers recently that Hamas was negotiating with PLO in Amman just 2 days ago about their participation in the forthcoming Palestine National Council meetings, and they demanded 40% of the seats. So at least by their estimation, or maybe it's a bargaining position, I don't know, they claim to have about 40%. Others put the numbers or figures much lower than that. But regardless of the numbers, they are definitely there, and there are definitely reasons why at this time the Islamic movement, particularly the Muslim Brethren, decided to join the uprising and to become an important anti-occupation force.
What do you think the implications?
It's the problem with being outside.
Is the sound okay? What do you think the implications of, why do you think the popularity may be growing, and what do you think the future implications of it growing?
Well, first of all,
Or for the society?
yes. First of all, it's very hard to say whether their appeal is growing or not. I think that perhaps a plateau has been reached in terms of their appeal and in terms of their actual membership or following. So the major thrust came in the first 2 years of the uprising. Now, the various reasons could be adduced, I think, to explain this phenomenon. Partly, I think the general rise in the importance of the Islamic movements in the Arab world in general, in the Islamic world in general. The fact that the political process was really not getting very far in terms of the PLO and the Palestine National Movement. The fact that the left perhaps had been losing some of its viability. And also, I think generally the sort of conservative nature of society. So all of these, I think, together can explain why this movement began gaining some ground. I don't want to exaggerate their importance or their influence, but definitely, as I said earlier, they are a political force to be reckoned with, and I think proof of this can be found in the fact that the PLO is now sitting down to talk to them and negotiating with them about the nature of their participation in the Palestinian movement and in the political process.
You mentioned failure of the left political groups. So they would perhaps have gained strength with the failure of the FETA program over the last few years. It seems like they would have been the ones.
Well, first of all, I don't know if I said failure of the left, but I didn't mean utter failure. I'm talking about a relative lessening in their ability to mobilize. Let's put it this way. I think, well, I mean, several reasons. One perhaps obvious reason, I think, is that on the international level, on the world level, the left has, and by the left I mean here the official communist movement, has, suffered several setbacks and is in disarray. So this has reflected itself on the left here and on people's perception of what the left really is. No matter how much some of the leftist groups may wish to distance themselves from the nature of the regimes, that were predominant in Eastern Europe, but still, I think, on a certain level, you will find that there are a lot of questions, at least in people's minds, about the viability of, Marxist analysis and Marxist ideology in general. And on the other hand, what I really meant was not that just the left had lost some of its viability, but the whole, PLO in general, which is a secular organization and represents a secular movement, had reached a sort of a dilemma as to how to approach the question of bringing about an end to the occupation and what the proper strategy was. Of course, the uprising exactly came there and bolstered the PLO and bolstered its image, its strength, and of course that's, I think, one of the major accomplishments of the uprising. But at the same time, it allowed or gave an opportunity to some sectors of the society, and particularly those which were, let's say, more susceptible to Hamas's way of thinking, to find for itself a political role and to play a political role. I mean, before the uprising, the Muslim Brethren were not really involved in protest activities against the occupation. But after the uprising, I believe they felt that they had to join or else risk losing their constituencies. So they joined. So anyway, the relationship between the secular movement and the Islamic movement is a dynamic one, I think, and it's very hard to say with any finality where things are going. I think if you want an assessment, the national movement represented by the PLO will continue to be predominant and will continue to command the loyalties and the identification of the majority of the people here. And I think that the answer is clear, perhaps, and that is that it does have a political program, it does have realizable political objectives, whereas the Islamic movement, unless it changes its analysis and its position, does not have any clear either analysis, in my opinion, or program or platform in terms of how it sees the possibilities of bringing an end to the occupation. I mean, if you read their covenant, you will find that they talk in general about the formation of Islamic nation, the prerequisite for which is the dissemination of Islamic ideas all over the Arab world and in the Muslim world. So it's a very messianic sort of version. It's not realpolitik.
What happens to women's position within that society? Is it
Which
within Hamas ideology?
actually, it's interesting. I wish to at least contribute towards correcting some stereotypes which people in the West might have about what, let's say, the hijab, which is the head covering, and the Islamic dress in general mean. You could, on one level, just look at them as symbols of oppression, or at least symbols of the unequal position of women, and the fact that the hijab segregates men from women and so on. So on one level, one could look at it on that way, and there is certain validity to some aspect of that way of looking at it. But on the other hand, it also should be realized that through the hijab, many women who otherwise would not be joining public life are finding it possible to participate in public life, to go to universities, to go out to work. So in other words, you might find it contradictory or ironic, but the hijab is making it possible for women to go out. And I must say that the Islamic movement has focused and has paid attention to mobilizing women and holding religious study sessions and all kinds of other courses and training sessions and things like this for women. So they are giving women an opportunity to get out of the home and to participate. Of course, they have a certain vision of what women's position in society should be, but definitely that vision does not mean exclusion of women from public life. Now, we have at Birzeit University, for instance, a large number of women now who wear the hijab, and I at least cannot say from my experience of teaching them that they are in any way behaving like second-class people or in any way, viewing themselves as contributing less to society. In fact, they're quite outspoken, and perhaps that hijab gives them the confidence and the ability to be aggressive that they wouldn't otherwise have. This by in itself is something that is interesting and needs investigation. So, I mean, the picture, as what I wanted to say, is not all bleak in the sense that the Islamic movement wants to limit women's role. I think what's important to realize is that the Islamic movement came on the scene in the Muslim world in general at a time when certain facts were well entrenched. One of them was the entry of women in the labor force. That already had been well entrenched, and there was no way that they could reverse this kind of a social and economic trend. And on the other hand, women's education had also become very much a force. So, and it had become a reality. So I think the Islamic movement had to accommodate itself to these realities, which were there on the ground and which, of course, they couldn't change. So I think what has happened is that they have not only accommodated themselves to it, but have also tried to reinterpret it within an Islamic framework.
If Palestine is given independence and statehood, what kind of economic and social and political changes do you see for women?
For women?
And you could talk about that also in relation to what changes you see now, if any. Or would you like to be given to women?
Yes. Well, actually, this is a very important question, and one which is being discussed in feminist circles and also generally among intellectuals and others in the occupied territories. And that question is the future of, or let's say the nature of the independent Palestinian state. So in general, for instance, there's a lot of concern that the state should be democratic, and in relation to women in particular, there is concern, and I think it's well-founded, that political independence will not necessarily mean emancipation for women, and will not necessarily mean that women will have equal opportunities in terms of their access to education and to employment, to all the privileges which a state has to grant its citizens. And we have examples of other colonial, post-colonial situations where these rights were not automatically granted. So there is a great deal of concern, and there is awareness, and there is also, I would say, a great deal of discussion in the women's movement today about these issues. And there is a great deal of self-criticism, particularly regarding the fact that for years the women's movement gave priority to the national question and priority to national liberation, and tried to postpone or to ignore questions relating to women's position in society. Now, of course, it's understandable why that happened. Now, it's ironic, actually, in a way, that the uprising, which is primarily a national liberation struggle, should have provided the impetus for the women's movement to examine the social question. And this is exactly what has happened. There are a number of meetings that have taken place. In fact, there was an important conference in December 1990 in Jerusalem in which all these issues were addressed. So there is an increasing awareness. Wait for this.
Was this conference also with Jewish women, or just Arab? Okay, I heard it was humanity?
No, it was an all-Palestinian thing.
Okay.
So, in terms of what one anticipates, I think I anticipate that the women's movement will become active. At least I hope that it will serve as a pressure group, as a strong lobby within the Palestinian national movement. And if we do have a state, it will be a pressure group like any other pressure group that you would have in a democratic society. And there are a lot of areas where we need legislation, progressive legislation. And I'm talking about areas such as employment, such as women's rights within the family, such as other rights, educational rights. And there's a whole number of issues that need to be addressed urgently. So if we are going to have a democratic and progressive state, these issues have to be addressed. And the women's movement will make its voice heard, definitely. I think so.
Do you think the sociological effects of the Intifada, say having number of men in prison, women working in cooperatives, these kinds of things have had a huge impact on?
Well, it's hard to assess whether they've had a huge impact or not, because I think it's still too early to assess the impact of developments during the uprising. I think, well, I wish to make two comments perhaps. One, I think that there had, and here there is a general awareness that there has been a certain degree of exaggeration in the assessment of the increasing role for women during the uprising. And the fact that there's an awareness that this was an exaggeration, I think can be reflected in several meetings which I have attended, where women have let's say, lamented the fact that that certain high visibility that women had in the first 1 or 2 years of the uprising has more or less dissipated. The fact that women's activism has diminished. So there's an awareness that these things happen. So in fact, I think there was from the very beginning an exaggeration, and it's not hard to explain why this happened, because you know, we're talking about a period where the confrontations were at their height, and you saw women on the streets and so on. So people started drawing all kinds of conclusions from this, which were hasty and which any sociologist could have told them were you know, premature. So that's one general statement I wish to make. Another statement I think one needs to make is that it's still early to assess the impact not only of, let's say, increased female participation in cooperatives and so on, but also generally the increased politicization of women since the early 1970s. The cumulative effect of this, I think, will be shown in it's already showing in this generation, people of my age, but more importantly, people of the next generation, that's people in their 20s. We shall see. We shall see how all of this is going to affect their status within the family, how it's going to affect the sexual division of labor in the family, for instance. We'll see how this affects employment opportunities. That's how you measure success. I mean, these are the indicators you look for, and that's how you measure it. So we shall see. But there's a long road to travel still.
Bring it back briefly to the comments on the Islamic movement. Point out that they've gained strength at the expense of the overtly political movement.
Well, no, they are an overtly political movement, but I said they gain strength at the expense of the PLO groups, you know, the PLO groups. No, the exclusive, the PLO groups, yes, the PLO affiliated groups, secular. Because the Islamic movement is very political. It's a political movement.
But you have, you, I think, tried to say, if I understood you right, that they're political because they can be political, but the first agenda was religious.
No, you see, I wouldn't separate religion from politics in that way. They were political all the time. But what I said, because anytime you put forth a vision of what kind of a society you want and what kind of role citizens should play, that's a political vision, at least the way I look at it. Now, what I said earlier was that throughout the period leading up to the uprising, they had not played an active role in opposing the occupation. They had not. Of course, they had all kinds of positions against Zionism and against the usurpation of Jews. And here they talk about the Zionists as Jews of Palestine and all of that. But practically speaking, they had not engaged in organized activity to confront the occupation. And that's what they decided to do in a very conscious way, I think, at the outbreak of the uprising, very consciously.
So you don't see their growing support yet.
I think.
You don't see their growing support as necessarily a failure of political will.
No, I wouldn't say that. No, I think.
Do you see it in any way as,
Yes.
as a shift away from resistance to the occupation?
No, no.
Example, searching for approaches.
No, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't definitely look at it that way. No, because you see, what's important to realize is that the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, as well as Islamic Jihad, and other Islamic groups are very clear on their opposition to the occupation, and they are mobilizing their constituency on that basis. So definitely membership in Hamas or identification with it or sympathy with it does not mean an apolitical attitude. No, there is definitely. Now, it didn't used to be that way, as I pointed out earlier, but Hamas has definitely rallied. And in fact, in my opinion, the fact that they appealed to people, and one of the bases for their appeal was that they adopted a nationalist line. So now, of course, Hamas and the Islamic movement in general has a very clear social agenda as well. I mean, I wouldn't put it in terms of social policies and so on, but they have a certain social outlook or analysis. And here they focus a lot on self-education, self-purification. They focus on the importance of creating a strong Muslim, person with Muslim principles. So on that level, this is not political, it's true. But somehow during the uprising, all of this is feeding into the general political line. So it's a very political movement, definitely. And they view themselves as such as well. The fact that Hamas would go to Amman and negotiate with the PLO in itself means that it views itself as a political movement. And of course, I anticipate that if we have a state someday, there will be a very strong opposition party. They will be there as an opposition party, and they will be agitating for all the things which Islamic parties in other Arab countries are agitating for today.
Do you have a little more time?
No. It's about 10 minutes. Is that
okay?
Is that
Can I just ask you what you think the sociological effects of the Persian Gulf War?
The war.
Palestinian?
Well, the war definitely had one major impact, which is that many Palestinians suffered a decline in their incomes as a direct result of the war. One, remittances from relatives working in the Gulf area were either completely lost or cut or else diminished. And two, of course, many people had to leave their jobs in the Gulf and come back. And three, and this is sort of a, you might say, an indirect result of the Gulf War, and is, I think, very sinister, and that is that the Israeli authorities, I think, took advantage of the situation of the war and cut down drastically the proportion of Palestinians employed in Israel. So now, I don't know exactly what the estimates are now, but they are close to half. The number of Palestinians working in Israel now is close to half the figure before the war. And of course, the reasons given are security reasons, and many Palestinians are now denied work permits to go and work across the Green Line in Israel. So that, of course, has had an important impact on the local economy, Palestinian economy, the lost income. And of course, you know that the economic infrastructure here is not capable of absorbing this labor force. So there's a lot of unemployment and hidden unemployment in the occupied territories today. And also, I must say, also there has been another impact of the Gulf War, and this is that many institutions in the occupied territories which used to receive funds from Gulf countries and no longer receive them. And here I would mention universities, hospitals, charitable organizations which have all kinds of social welfare projects. All of these organizations have been hit hard, very hard.